Everyone. We're about ready to start the meeting. If everybody could take their seats. Good evening. Today is February 5th, and this is the Education Committee meeting. So I know everybody's thinking birds, but from Eagles, I think we have to pivot to Cardinals for tonight. So with that, so we have our committee members here, Titia Sherpier, Robert Kim, Art Levinowitz, and myself, Joan Ludwig. So, are there any announcements or communications?
There are none this evening.
Okay, are there minutes? There are minutes, so anyone who has corrections, give them to Brooke. All right, for tonight we have two presentations. I'm looking forward to both of them. The first one is Rick Smith, who is going to be speaking about STEM guitar building.
You got to speak into the mic, and the mic's got to be working. You can record it.
No,
Lift
not really.
Thing. You know how to... It's working. Just have to move the mic stand.
Sarah will be here later. Not really.
All right, there we go.
Good.
Okay. Well, hello and thank you for having us. And my name is Rick Smith. I have been teaching in Upper Dublin for almost 20 years, and my family and I live in Upper Dublin as well. So tonight, I just wanted to present some information about STEM guitar building and how it relates to our Upper Dublin guitar program here and at the high school. So this is STEM-oriented. As you can see, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, and the STEAM component adds the arts. So the National STEM Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Guitar Project, this was funded partially by a grant through Purdue University, and this National Science Foundation STEM Guitar Project provides innovative professional development to high school and community college faculty. And this was something that I took part in, and I say thank you for that. 2 Julys ago, I did some training, and faculty teams made up of about groups of 5, all different kinds of teachers from this area, and we took part in a intensive 5-day guitar design and build project. And each faculty member was able to build his or her own custom electric guitar, and we engaged in student-centered learning activities that relate to the guitar design and to specific math, science, and engineering topics. And this is the first guitar, or the prototype, that I built in the summer. This was at Pennsbury High School. This is where the week-long training took place, and this was the guitar that I built during that time and learned how to build using the different MLAs, which were modular learning activities, and how they related to students and building. So we use this as our prototype for all the wiring, and this is called fret wire, and these are spaced specifically so that it can stay in tune. There's lots of different components. There's soldering and different parts, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But so that's the very first one. And also, coming up this July, there's a CNC, the computer numeric control for guitar, and starting to work with Brian Capps on developing guitar parts using the CNC machine that he received, I think, a couple years ago. So quickly, I will tell you a little bit about the numbers part of it, but the quantifiable learning outcomes. As you can read, the Guitar Building Institute participant teachers from 15 states assessed 769 students from grades 6 through community college level on their knowledge of 12 modular learning activities, MLAs, skills using pre and post assessments. And overall, the STEM guitar building curriculum resulted in significantly higher scores in STEM-related concepts for this group of 769 students. Well, after the training, I came back to school with the students, and there were some pre and post MLAs tests that I was able to work through with the students, and by completing those, the students earned $400 in guitar bucks through the Guitar Building website, and what that meant was that we could buy two more complete guitar kits for the students. So what we do now is, as a class, students have the opportunity to build different parts of the guitar until it's a finally completed working electric guitar. Here are some pictures of students building the guitar body, or actually shaping the guitar body with an angle grinder. And the student outcomes, the big thing about STEM guitar building is design, build, play, and learn. And that's exactly what they get to do. And one of the great things that I can offer the students is that I've been playing for a really long time. It's all right. And so not only do they get a chance to build, but I obviously teach them how to, I call it work and play with the instrument as well. And then we are working with faculty and community members. So there's a picture of Mr. Rogers. He's been a great help in helping with the painting of it and providing opportunities so the students can go in and use some of his space, which is excellent, and it's just great to share ideas. And here's just a quick video of a student sanding a guitar body. There she goes. Okay. And whoops, how do I exit out of this? There she goes. All right, what I want to do is get to the next slide. Maybe what we can do here is Madison. This is Madison Vogel. She could talk a little bit about preparing the guitar body for painting or swirl dipping, which I'll talk about in a second. So maybe we can just go back one. All right.
Good evening, guys. It's very nice to be here in front of you talking. I've been in the guitar program since I was a freshman. I am currently a senior, and my father, who's over here, his name's Dave, he and I, well, mostly him, have been building guitars for about 3 years now. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about what's called the golden ratio. The golden ratio is a mathematical concept, and just so I don't get this wrong, I'll admit I have some notes here. It describes a relation between two segments, one of which is 1.618 times larger than the other segment. So this has been used since, I believe, ancient Greece to create a consistent artistic and geometric basis for building and learning. And this does apply to mostly sanding the guitar body as well as other steps, because it ends up being easier to paint it or stain it or, do whatever you're going to do with it. And it also makes for a more comfortable guitar to hold and play. So I'm going to turn it over a little bit to my dad, who's going to talk a little bit about his involvement with this program and his personal experiences with it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so thanks for having me. Since Madison started in her freshman year. I started to get interested in guitar. I never touched one prior to that. She received an acoustic guitar. I said, I don't want to pay somebody to string this, so let me go learn. And so I went to a class, learned how to string it, and it just kind of caused an obsession. So started to learn a lot about it. Mr. Smith was talking about the importance of the frets, and there's a relationship in the distance of each fret to keep the notes playing in tune. The ratio that Madison was talking about also can be found, and this is a Les Paul style guitar, and the dimensions of the upper bout and the lower bout are approximately the 1.61 ratio. It's aesthetically pleasing, found in nature all over the place. So I've been involved in building guitars. I've talked to Mr. Smith incessantly about it. He invited me to go to the Martin factory tour with him. That was very interesting. My first experience in a guitar building professional facility, so it was really kind of an awesome thing. And just, I think, it keeps, Madison interested in, doing activities that are fun and engaging in a learning environment. So, thank you. All right, this is Go Green Eagles.
Okay, and this is Sam, and here is a wiring diagram of how the pickups and the volume knob and tone and the switch are wired in the back, and Sam had a big part in doing that.
Yep. I'm Sam, and I'm a sophomore, and I took music industry class last year with Mr. Smith, and I had a great time, and I got an opportunity to build the guitar and do wiring and soldering, and it was it's educational. It teaches you to think on your feet, and there was a lot of creative problem solving. For example, it didn't come with a fuse, so we figured out a way to incorporate a grounding system without the fuse, and it looks complicated when you open it up, but it's pretty straightforward. And I made a bunch of friends when I was doing it. I did this with my friend Tim Buck. He couldn't be here tonight, but it helped me open up doors, careers in music, and it was inspirational working on that, and it's cool that it's operational and you can play it.
All right. So this is a working, well, both of these are working electric guitars, both of these. This was the prototype that I built, just to remind you again. This is the first class-built one that the students built. This is the one that Sam did the wiring on that he was referring to. And just a couple of pictures. The students do use the guitars. That's on the left, the students performing at the Plymouth Meeting Mall. And this is real interesting. This is the most recent guitar. This is called a swirl-dipped guitar. And I learned how to do it at the training, but I had the opportunity just a few weeks ago to actually try it, and it came out, kind of neat. That's what it looks like, and if you want to watch that video, it's just a few seconds, kind of gives you an idea of how it's done. They're adding paint on top of a trash can full of water, and the paint stays on top. And they quickly submerge the guitar body, and then it comes out. Congratulations, everybody. Very cool. Okay. So that's how that's done. And then, I think I have one more here if I can. Oh, there we go. And finally, So, the STEM Guitar Building Program is a recipient from the Upper Dublin Education Foundation. They bought the first 2 classroom actual guitar kits, this one and the tools. And the STEM Guitar Building Program is a grant recipient from the Upper Dublin Education Foundation. Upper Dublin guitar students, as part of the STEM Guitar Building Program swirl dipped this guitar, which will be completed and available to win through a raffle at the Music in Our Schools concert. And that guitar we're going to raffle away when the students complete that. And the proceeds from the raffle will be enough to annually fund the STEM Guitar Building Program. We'll be able to buy enough class guitar kits to do this for as long as we can. Now, students also are starting to buy their own kits and in class, and then at the end of the year, when they're finished, they can walk away with their own guitar. But these are class guitar, which students, different students had different projects at different parts in completing it. And this particular one was presented to Mr. Schultz by the first STEM guitar building class that sits in his office, and hopefully one day we'll have a lesson or something on that, and maybe can help him, because he has shown some interest in playing. I would really be happy to sit down and teach you something someday. And finally, Max is going to play just a little bit, and then we are done. Let's see here. Try the yeah. I hope. And maybe you can stand there. Thank you for letting us present. Thank you.
Before you leave, people might have some questions or comments. So, thank you all for coming. I mean, there are a couple of things that I really like about this program. One, it is, to me, one of the examples of a really integrated STEAM program, because you learn all kinds of, it brings everything together. It brings the math and physics probably,
Right.
and the art and the design and the music, and so to me, it's an exciting program. The only other the question I had is, are the people who are in this, is it in your guitar playing class, so it starts out with people who are interested in playing and then they learn to build, or is it other people who come in?
Well, the building takes place within the guitar classes, and then I also offer it during the enhancements, and that's where a lot of it, and I also offer it during the enhancements, and a lot of it takes place there too. So, and sometimes after school, and it takes about a full school year to complete one, a little bit at a time. But yes, it takes place during the regular school day, within the class, within the existing.
So it's really people who are start out being interested in playing, who then want to build the guitars?
Well, yeah, but now I'm able to sell it, so to speak, and if they want to, the kids want to start with the building component, they can, and then learn how to play wherever they're comfortable. starting, it's fine with me, yeah.
Anyone else?
Mr. Smith and Madison, Sam and Max and Madison's dad, thank you very much for your presentation. I had a couple of questions. Number one was, how many students participate currently in the program, and is there an opportunity for growth, and if so, how do you see that?
For the STEM guitar part?
Yes.
Right now, maybe there's 25 in different groups, 25 kids who are taking part in it, 5 that have their own guitar kits. And for the growth, yeah, it's just the kids are becoming more involved really through the enhancements. As that's when I see some of the newer ones, the newer students, and the ones that are just interested, in the STEM building part of it. And then if they wanted to continue, they would sign up for a guitar class and have more opportunity.
Yeah, and then the other question is probably more for the students. Do you have any examples where you used what you learned by this whole process in any of your other classes? And yeah, if you want to walk up to the microphone and answer, that would be great.
So I by no means say that I have a background in woodworking. It's more my dad. But this year I started a intro to 3D art class in which we use hand tools like coping saws, jeweler saws, etc. And we're just starting to get into wood. And now that I have a background and I know how to sand and I do know how to use saws and everything, it's really helping me excel in that class.
Yeah, the other day I pulled out my soldering kit and I actually worked on a refrigerator, and I wouldn't have if I didn't know how to solder. So that was, yeah, I have applied that in real life.
So, like, for instance, from what I learned from the STEM program, like, I'm in a band. So when I have technical issues with my equipment, this actually really helps me, like, learn how to, like, what problems are going on with my equipment on stage, so I can figure it out really quickly. So that's what I learned.
And then Max, I have probably one question for you. Just as you were playing, how does this compare to what I would call a professional guitar?
A professional guitar?
Well, one that comes from the factory compared to one you built yourself.
This feels more homemade, you know? Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm not used to it. This feels a lot more homemade, and it's a lot different, you know? You can customize it any way you want. That's the beauty of it, in a way. Like, you can gloss it, and you can make it look however you want. While the other guitars, they have a very specific model. Like, the Fenders all the Fenders are very similar, and same with the Gibsons. Well, these you can remodel it, and you can add new stuff to it. It's really cool. I think it's awesome, actually.
Anyone else?
Mr. Smith, I remember when we first started the guitar program, I was very excited about when we were planning and we built the space for the guitar program. Can you briefly discuss what you do? What kinds of classes, what your classes are? Do you do anything else besides the guitar class? And just, I think it's a very special program that we have here in Upper Dublin.
Well,
And why do you think it's so important that we have a guitar class?
well, put me on the spot, right?
Yeah.
Well, the guitar class, why did we start it, you say?
Yeah.
Well, we started because there was a need for it. The kids had showed an interest, and a very steady interest in wanting to learn how to work with the guitar, and it's something that we offer as a no experience necessary. So if they wanted to, literally the first thing I teach them is how to hold the guitar. And for many students, that is maybe they're reintroduced if they played an instrument earlier and then stopped. They sometimes come back to play the guitar as a second instrument, or for a lot of students, that's the first time that they actually get an instrument in their hand, and it's something that they can get an immediate result with, play a song that they most likely will know. Of course, we'll listen to it first anyway, but I try to start out with something that they definitely can recognize and get instant feedback, play within a group, whether they're part of a small ensemble or a large ensemble, and they get to really go at their own pace and develop their skills. That works for them. For some students, they don't have a guitar at home, so the only time they get to work with the instrument is in school. Some are very advanced, and they use the time in school wisely to compose or to learn another style. We offer at the honors level nylon classical string, classical style guitar. There's lead guitar techniques. And so within that program, we also offer ukulele, which is very popular right now, mandolin, banjo, but in that rare occasion that a student wants to play that. But it's growing and it's very steady. And now with the STEM guitar building component, it's just more available for the students to take part of.
So how many sections of guitar do you have this year?
Typically 5, to this year 4.
Are you teaching any other classes in addition to the guitar? I know sometimes.
Music industry.
Yeah. Okay.
And then outside is cardinal opportunities.
Right.
Also do that. But and then I also help a lot with the Performing Arts Center with the audio and video setup during the school day.
Well, how do I say? I think what's special about the guitar program is a lot of the kids probably wouldn't participate in a music program. Mm-hmm. It's different playing in the orchestra or the band. I think and I think by giving them the opportunity to experience guitar, I think it also encourages them to realize the importance of music and probably to appreciate more STEM and what we offer at Upper Dublin. So I think it also helps them, motivates them, I think, to do better in other classes, too.
Certainly.
Because they're looking forward to coming to your class and playing guitar.
I agree, yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Is it a team that builds a guitar, or is it an individual that builds his or her own guitar?
Interesting. Well, it typically is a group of, say, 3 to 5 students who will work on a certain part of the guitar for a class period, meaning just to install this is called fret wire, and that's kind of a process that takes quite a while, and they would take turns. So each student, say a group of 5, one would do the first fret, second, third, until they completed that group. Another group might work on the playability of the neck and the comfort of the neck by sanding and using some of the tools that way. So typically I have them work in small groups. And sometimes an individual will stay after school or during the enhancement period, and they'll work on the neck or the body or something like that.
Okay, and the body, is that their unique design, the shape of the body? They design that themselves?
They do. It comes kind of very rough. It can be a different shape, this being one of our newest ones. But you can see how it's kind of thin here. Well, this was all just one thickness all the way around, and they had to sand, and it's called that's for the placement of it against your hip or your arm like that. So they have to kind of make it comfortable and playable, and that takes quite a bit of sanding.
Okay.
You mentioned Mr. Capps, who teaches engineering and architecture. You mentioned 3D art. Is there any formal or informal way that it overlaps directly with math curriculum, science curriculum, or other technology curriculum to build out the STEM component of this?
Yes. I work with Mr. Gessing, who's a math teacher, and he helps a lot with that. But on this diagram here, for instance, if I roll right over that number 1, that's how the guitar relates to geometry. And then there's a lesson plan that goes in that with that. Then if I just roll over this number 2, this is from the Guitar Building website. There's a CAD and a computer-aided design, and we'll just randomly pick, say, number 12, intonation. and it tells you all these different activities and ways that you could material properties of wood. So yeah, they can relate to all the different core areas for sure.
So do any of those other teachers participate in the enhancement or after-school portions of it?
Starting
too?
to bring more
Yeah.
in. Like I said, Mr. Rogers, Mr. Capps, they help a lot, and Mr. Guessing. And I'm going to hopefully offer it to the teachers, see if any of them want to build their own. It's still new.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Just one or two questions.
Sure.
One is, you mentioned in terms of, or Mrs. Shipper asked about expansion. Would you ever consider doing acoustic guitars as well? And secondly, I guess is, since, I forgot the gentleman's name, but mentioned a visit to the Martin factory. Is that part of your programming as well?
Yeah, yes. Actually, I just spoke with Amy Shields about at the vocational tech school, and that might be something that we can work with more. And yes, every year all the guitar students have the opportunity to go to the Martin Guitar Factory. Most go. We also go to WXPN and World Cafe Live. We tour XPN. And you were asking about acoustic guitars. Yes. Before that, though, ukuleles. We're going to try to make ukuleles first. They're a little bit easier, and I'm working with a friend of mine at Pennsbury who already makes them, and so I've been getting some pointers. So we're going to start with the ukuleles first. The real difficult thing about the acoustic guitars or ukuleles is actually bending the wood in that shape, so you have to get a certain kind of press. So, yeah, I would like to do that sometime, yeah.
Thank you very much. That was, oh.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. And thank you all for coming and for playing for us. So,
Thank you.
While we shift gear, if anybody who's come in the room wants to take a seat, there's plenty of seats. Okay. They don't want, well, they can come in. They can sit down if they want. Like Olszewski or... Yeah.
Thank you.
Test.
Yeah, it is.
I was going to mention that.
You play?
That's fine.
It's going to work.
Okay. Our next presentation is Dr. Miner talking about guided reading.
Beat that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I asked to go first. I wish I had.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
I know. I'm going to try to be exciting, but I didn't bring a book to read to you or anything, so there's no performance aspect of this. I apologize. So I am talking tonight about guided reading at the request of the board. We have been doing a lot of work around guided reading in the district, and so I'm happy this evening to just kind of bring board members up to speed, education committee members in particular, regarding what guided reading is, what it looks like here at Upper Dublin, what we've been doing around this work, and where we hope to go in the future with it. So most of the information that I will be sharing with you tonight is actually information taken from Irene Fountas and Gay-Sue Pinnell. They are the preeminent reading researchers, I would say, in the United States. And they have written several books, many of which will be referenced this evening, on the topic of guided reading. So I would like to credit them with the thoughts here. So what is guided reading? Guided reading is a small group instruction that has explicit teaching to prepare students to take on more challenging texts. So it's done at a table with just a few students as opposed to a whole group instruction period. The students read text at their instructional level. So there are 3 levels that we recognize when we are looking to assess students' reading ability at the elementary schools. The first is independent level. That's a book that a child can read without any assistance from an adult whatsoever. The second is their instructional level, which is a book that's slightly beyond their ability to do it independently, but they can do it with guidance from a teacher. That's why we call it guided reading. And in fact, that then has them go into the next level and continue their growth. There's a term in education called ZPD, or the zone of proximal development, which is that area where you're right now ready to learn and grow. And so we're focusing on books that are right in that range where students are ready to grow. They need assistance to get there, but once they master it, they will go up a level. And then finally, there's a frustrational level, which is a point at which a child can neither read the book independently, nor would they be successful even with the help of a teacher. And so we avoid putting students with frustrational texts. Students learn strategic reading actions. So for a young child, a strategic reading action may be using the pictures, using the first sound of a word, those sorts of things. And then as children grow, we talk about context clues and inferencing and things that are much more complex. And then we ask students to provide evidence of their thinking through their oral reading, their talk, their extension through writing when that's appropriate. One of the questions that I think has been on the mind of some administrators and board members is guided reading something different than ReadyGen? We know that we made a major investment in ReadyGen. We began that program a year ago. And so one of the things that I want to make clear this evening is that ReadyGen prescribes, and the minutes can vary a little bit, but right from the beginning at Upper Dublin, we adopted a 30-60-30 model. That refers to the approximate number of minutes to be spent on the different component parts of that program. So the 30-minute whole group instruction may include shared reading with ReadyGen texts, mini lesson, and skills work. And then there's 60 minutes for small group instruction, which is guided reading, and then 30 minutes for writing, which is when grammar, persuasive writing, different styles and types and modes of writing are taught during that period of time. So that 60 minutes of small group instruction has been in ReadyGen right from the beginning. What we're doing and developing and changing, and why we've come before the board requesting professional development and additional resources, is because although those things are included in ReadyGen, we need more in terms of growing our teachers. Our teachers weren't 100% expert in guided reading before we got ReadyGen, because we had before that used a basal program without so much focus on guided reading. So our teachers are at a wide array of readiness for guided reading in ReadyGen. Some are experts on this day, and some are really new to it and need more professional development support. In the same way, ReadyGen provides resources for guided reading, and I'll show you a slide later on, but they are at this point in our practice not enough in terms of how quickly students move through books. And again, I will show you that in a later slide. So what are the characteristics of guided reading? As I mentioned, we work with small groups of students, typically 4 to 6. Really more than 6 stops being small group instruction and starts getting closer to large group instruction. So we really try to limit those numbers. The book selections, as I mentioned, are based on students' instructional needs. Each child typically reads the entire text. Now, that's generally with the younger children in the shorter text. Sometimes they may go back and read text independently if they're longer texts. But the key part here is it's not round robin or popcorn reading where each child takes a turn or they call on another student to read. They're reading the book, either whisper reading to themselves for younger children or reading silently in their heads, and then a teacher may ask them to read aloud in a quiet voice so that they can listen for their fluency and listen for their ability to decode those words. The emphasis is on reading many books with increasing levels of difficulty while focusing on those strategies. And ongoing assessment is conducted through running records, anecdotal notes, and those things drive instruction. So an anecdotal note may be a teacher may write down, I noticed that when Johnny reads, he always drops the D off of the end of words. And so I'm going to make sure that I draw his attention to that end sound. A running record is when a teacher actually takes a piece of text and they record a student's errors. They record, is there a pattern to the errors? For instance, are they making substitutions for words that continue to keep the meaning but change the actual word? So if a student would say, the word, this is a bad example, but if they use the word rug instead of carpet, that would keep the meaning, although it wasn't the correct word in the reading. So a guided reading lesson itself, although there's a 60-minute block allocated to it, ideally takes approximately 20 minutes so that teachers can see multiple groups within that block period. Not every group in their class every day, but multiple groups throughout the week. And the lesson follows a very simple structure. They introduce the text, they read the text, they discuss the text, the teacher makes the teaching point for the day, They do a very brief letter word work, and then they have an optional writing response. The book that you see there again is a Fountas and Pinnell book, guided reading, and we're using that in our professional development in the district, both in terms of our full day in services around this and a differentiated supervision group that we're running right now doing a book study on that book. Guided reading looks very different K to 2 than 3 to 5 in terms of what the students are actually doing at the table. So again, in K to 2, they're very short texts. The students can read them typically in one session. The focus is on strategic actions within that text. So how do I solve a word? How do I monitor and correct if I say a sentence and I realize that didn't sound right? How do I go back and fix that? Searching for and using information, summarizing and developing fluency. A lot of times people think of fluency as words correct per minute. How quickly can a child read? And that kind of grew out of something called the DIBBLS, the Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. It focused a lot on timing how quickly students can read. But fluency is much more than speed or rate. In fact, it's reading in a way that has expression, that acknowledges punctuation, as well as an appropriate rate. So it's not a stifled, robotic type of read, but a read that sounds much more like speech. And so then sometimes our K-2 readers are ready to do more than that and go and think about the text and beyond the text. And we'll talk a little bit about that more in the next slide. So in grades 3 to 5, again, we're sitting at the table. We're in a small group. We're using leveled text, but these tend to be longer, and so sometimes we can't read them all at the table. We might read them independently, or sometimes we may not read them entirely, but if a child wants to read that book, the teacher may allow them to do that independently. The focus is on strategic actions in what Fountas and Pinnell refer to as beyond the text or about the text. So that's predicting, making connections, synthesizing information, making inferences, analyzing the text, and sometimes even critiquing the text, which are all much higher level thinking skills. And then again, in a 3 to 5 classroom, if a child needs to have within the text strategies taught, such as work on decoding, those sorts of things, of course the teacher will monitor and do that accordingly. This is the levels gradient that Fountas and Pinnell recognize as the different levels that a child may read at. So typically, children come into kindergarten at what we refer to as below an A. They are not able to read an A book, although we do have children who enter kindergarten as readers, and so there's some variability there. And then it goes all the way up through Z+. At each of the grade levels, you can see that there are a band of levels that we expect a child to get through during that period of time. So if you look at first grade, you can see that the child is expected to move from E all the way through J. That's a lot of levels. At the upper grades, there may be only 3 levels, T, U, and V, for instance, in 5th grade. Even though those are the benchmark levels for that grade, the reality is that kids in any given classroom are both well beyond that and well above. And so in a 2nd grade classroom, we've been doing RTI data this week. You may see a child who's reading at a level B, and you may see a child that's reading at a level U or V. That presents a challenge for any classroom teacher, certainly. And so small group guided reading allows them to target the instruction to those specific levels. When kids are far below, we're targeting their instruction in our RTI groups as well. And when kids are far above, one of the questions I often get, my title also includes Director of Gifted, is how do we differentiate for students? And one of the things that makes differentiation easier in reading than in math for our high-level students is that we can have them apply strategies to books at their reading level simply by swapping out and giving them more challenging and more difficult books. So that's easier to do sometimes than math, which follows a chronological sequence. So the range within in any given classroom typically centers around those benchmarks, but has children at either end of the spectrum. This is what an N book looks like. I just wanted to give you a random example. So N is approximately a 3rd grade text. Some of the features that you can see, we're still using bright, colorful pictures. This one is a fable. One of the features as the levels go up is that, for instance, the print gets smaller. When you have A, B, and C books, you have much less print on a page. The font is much bigger. Here you can also see that there's dialogue, that is an upper level skill versus a beginning reader's skill. So just to give you a sense of what an N might look like. So where are we and where do we hope to be? So as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, guided reading, small group instruction is an expected part of an ELA block using ReadyGen. And as I mentioned at the beginning, our teachers are in very different places. Many of our teachers have reading specialist certificates in addition to their elementary certificates, which make them very prepared and qualified to have guided reading be a part of their everyday practice. And for others, as I mentioned, it's brand new. And so one of the things that I think is critically important as a district is that we continue to offer differentiated professional development, not a one-size-fits-all, but really giving teachers a variety of options to kind of enter where they are in terms of their practice. The other thing that we really need to do is expand the resources. So ReadyGen gave us what I would say is a starter set for guided reading books. And so in the two pictures, and I used these same pictures in my finance presentation when I proposed buying additional guided reading materials. These are the teacher libraries on the left-hand side that we were able to get through ReadyGen, and we did purchase all of the titles available. And you can see that the one box is JK and the other box is JKL. The picture on the right is a guided reading library for teachers at a school district where they've been using guided reading for many years. And you can see that there are entire bookshelves devoted to J books. And why this is important is that teachers need to have a variety of titles to choose from so that they can hit kids where they are in terms of their interests. So if you have a reluctant young man who's really interested in sports, you may be able to select books around that topic. And also because we do move very quickly through a variety of texts, we don't want to run out of J books or run out of K books if the children aren't ready to move on at that point in time. At the very top of that slide, you see that I have a goal of, by 2020, that we really have model guided reading in all of our classrooms. And the reason for extending that goal out so far is because I really want to see all of our teachers feel like they have been very well supported through professional development as well as through having a wide array of high quality resources. And we recognize that that is going to take some time to do. But we think that we will get there and may very well get there sooner. One of the things that I'm particularly pleased to share is that one of the elements in guided reading is leveling your students appropriately. And this year, we are bringing in a trainer to train our reading specialists on using the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment to level students. I had hoped to get about 10 to 15 teachers to sign on in addition to the reading specialists, so that we would have 20 to 25 participants. Right now, I have 53 staff members who have asked to participate in that training as a completely optional training. Sadly, we will not be able to get that number of subs, but it's remarkable. And I think it's a testament to our teachers' excitement, commitment to doing high-quality work, and wanting to learn and grow. So I'm thrilled to have that number. I wish that we could have all the subs, but we will offer that again next fall so that we can get everybody trained who would like to be trained at this point in time. So our professional development, we began last year, we're continuing this year, and we'll continue to move forward. As I mentioned, we're trying to do it in a differentiated way so that teachers can really have some choice and options in terms of what do I need as an individual to grow. So we have borrowed the academic coach from one of the O&J Roberts elementary schools, and he has come to do model lessons where he does a guided reading lesson in our classrooms with ReadyGen materials, and our teachers observe and then get to do Q&A. And it's wonderful because it's not just someone at a podium like me right now lecturing, but real kids, real classrooms right in our schools with our materials, and that's been wonderful. And again, we've had about 50 teachers participate in that work over the 2 years we've been doing it, which is outstanding. We offer full-day in-services. This year we did one in the fall, K to 2. We're doing another one later in February for all of our 3 to 5 teachers on that guided reading book, that big, thick book that I showed you. We have differentiated supervision here at the district, which is a supervision option our teachers have instead of going through a typical evaluation model, and we're running one on the guided reading book study that Kathy Smythe is running. Excuse me, I'm running that one. Kathy Smythe is running the Literacy Continuum DS for our reading specialists, our more advanced practitioners, which is another book written by Fountas and Pinnell. Kathy has also been instrumental in having half-day in-service work around ReadyGen, around guided reading, and we continue to offer that on a regular basis. Classroom coaching is something that we're looking forward to pursuing more next year, and then the F&P benchmark training that I mentioned. This is, I think, a delightful picture of some of our students participating in a guided reading lesson. There is the academic coach from O&J Roberts modeling for our teachers, and around them you can see teachers from a variety of our buildings watching intently, taking notes, observing, and really learning from Stone how to lead a guided reading lesson. And these have just been wonderful experiences for everyone involved, including me. At this point, I will turn it over to the more exciting part of the evening for me, which is our special guests. I want to start with Kathy Smythe. I referenced her a couple of times in the presentation, and she's here tonight to talk a little bit about what it is that she's doing with guided reading for our school.
Thank you, Dr. Miner. It's been an exciting year this year with our professional development. Last year we adopted ReadyGen, and teachers were inundated with a lot of new things that they have not done before. In our old series, we had, which was the Basel series, we just used mentor text, which means we were using pieces of literature. And students were reading them, they were going through the skills and strategies, and they were meeting maybe in small groups with 3 types of books provided. ReadyGen now offers us the opportunity for students every day to have a book in students' hands. So every day they're reading a novel, real literature rather than just a piece. And it was kind of overwhelming for teachers because they were used to, after 9 years, using our old series that we just went through, and there was not a lot of really investigation of books. We would see the part of a book that would be in maybe the middle. So they didn't know what happened before, they didn't know what happened afterwards. Now they're able to read a whole novel. Teachers are able to look at the novels and decide what's really important in the novels, and they focus on that. And teachers were, concerned that they were doing a good job. As I said earlier today, the teachers in Upper Dublin, they want to do it perfect, and they want to do it perfect the first time. So it's been a real challenge this year for them. So what we've done is we've provided a lot of staff development. I'm really thrilled that we're able to bring trainers in for us, that they get professional development on the guided reading, which is part of ReadyGen. And that's where we found lacking in the program. Excuse me. That it said to go do guided reading, but teachers didn't know exactly what to do. And some of the questions they had were, okay, I'm going to meet with this small group, but what is everybody else doing in the classroom? So we're taking that on the 16th. We're going to be working with teachers on, excuse me, what they're doing with the other students, with a small group of teachers, K to 3. The other teachers will be working in guided reading with the Fontes Pinnell expert. So we have lots of work still to do, but teachers are excited and ready to move on.
Thank you, Mrs. Smythe. Our next guest is Mr. McAleer, who is leading at his building level this initiative.
All right, a lot to celebrate today in Upper Dublin. It was like a very calm day at our building today. I'm sure attendance will be very high Thursday also in all the buildings. So as a principal, part of your job is to observe teachers. And I taught for 20 years, and your principal would always ask you, what would you like me to observe you in teaching? And teachers kind of pick an area of comfort. I would choose math often. And I would always ask teachers, last year, how about I come watch you doing guided reading? And they would, I'm not comfortable with you coming in to watch that. So Kim offered some PD with Stone Phillips, right? Stone Stafford. With Stone Stafford. So Stone Stafford, as she mentioned in the training, and teachers were still hesitant. So I threw out like an email. I kind of said, I'll give you a candy bar and some coffee if you go. And teachers, if you ask them to do it, they will do it. So I think we had about 25 teachers from Fort Washington participate over the past year and a half. And this year, and at the end of last year, I did have the opportunity to work with teachers and go in and just watch them with guided reading. And I had an opportunity to watch Stone work. And even when I was a teacher, I was comfortable, but not that comfortable. Was I doing the running records correctly? Was I doing the anecdotal notes correctly? And I do feel the comfort level is there. About 20 years ago, we had a thing called TESSA. I think, Art, you may have been around. And TESSA stands for Teacher Expectation Student Achievement. And that was peer coaching, which we don't have that much right now. And I think when a principal's working with you, they're a little hesitant because you're the administrator. When you have teachers working with teachers, it's different. They're going to open up a little more with themselves. So last year at the end of the year, I asked Ed Bush, I said, can I come watch you do guided reading? He said, I'm not comfortable with you. I'll do Eureka Math. Which they said Eureka, which 3 years ago they would never want you to come in to do Eureka Math. And I said, well, I'm going to have Claire McCrae, our reading specialist, work with you on guided reading. And he was still hesitant. And I said, once a week, let her come in and model for you guided reading. And he finally agreed. And Claire is going to share that with you, because I think that kind of sparked the interest. And when you get teachers buying into something that's best for kids, it spreads. So if Claire can come up, and she'll share her miracle story with Ed.
Good evening. Since I am a reading teacher, I am going to read you the story of one teacher's journey with guided reading.
Yay, we have a performance.
Yes. No pictures, just the text. I actually worked with Ed 5 days a week, not one day. So I think that was impactful, having it every single day, just reinforcing. But this is our story. Last year, third grade teacher Ed Bush and I worked together to strengthen guided reading instruction in his classroom. Ed, for years, had expressed interest in learning how to better incorporate guided reading into his classroom. I modeled a lesson for Ed, and he watched. Afterwards, he said, I love the lesson, but I just don't see the value. I asked him why, and he replied, I just have so much curriculum to get through, I can't afford the time on anything else. I appreciated Ed's honesty and realized that there might be many teachers that were probably feeling the same way. We talked about transferring the skill lessons from ReadyGen, from the whole group lessons, and weaving them into the small group guided reading instruction. But I could see that he just was not there yet. I continued the lessons daily, and Ed watched. As the small group of students struggled with nonfiction text features, I explained to him how I had to change course and let student need guide the lesson. And that, in a nutshell, is why guided reading is so important. After just a few more lessons, Ed said, I have to say, I'm sold. He realized how impactful and important small group instruction is. If nonfiction text features had been taught in the whole group, he never would have known that this group of students had no understanding of the concept. He began to see the value of pulling the ReadyGen skills from whole group instruction and addressing them into small groups instead. We began teaching the guided reading groups together, modeling comprehension conversations in an unscripted, natural way. We offered different interpretations and viewpoints as the students chimed in with their own ideas. Finally, Ed was on his own. He began calling me or stopping me in the hall, telling me what a great guided reading lesson he had done. His students were saying, hey, you stole this idea from Mrs. McCrae. They were making the connections, they were learning, and Ed knew his students as readers better than ever. And I think that just goes to show you how a teacher that was reluctant came to just be so enthusiastic about the process of doing small group instruction and seeing its value from the interactions that we had. So that's it. And Connie is,
Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Thank you to Claire McCrae. She and Ed did an amazing job. Ed was unable to join us tonight. He does know we're talking about him. I thought that might be a question. He does know we were talking about him, but unfortunately he had an engagement and couldn't join us. But I do want to say that the work that has been done in Fort Washington is absolutely tremendous, as it is in all of our buildings. And so I'm really pleased right now to introduce Connie Nitschke, one of the teachers who works with guided reading on a daily basis.
Well, thank you for having all of us here tonight. I was actually really excited to have the opportunity to come before you. I want to thank Dr. Wheeler and also the school board for bringing to us Kim Miner, and I mean that most sincerely because, Kim, I don't know if you realize it, but you're exactly what our district needed. We needed your guidance, we needed your expertise, and we still do. And having been in this district for 27 years, and I'm thankful every day that I work here, it is my privilege and my honor to be part of this fine school district. I do know that there are certain areas where we had some work to do. And Kim, you're really helping us get that work done. And so what I wanted to mention to you tonight was when Kim talks about the materials that we need, that is what I feel like is making the difference for me with my small groups this year. So having the resources at my fingertips to pull and sit down and do just what Claire McRae just explained, where you are building your lesson based on the needs that are presented by your students. And when I can go and pull materials and know that I just captured, just as you said, I was just doing it this week, the interest of one of the athletes in my class, a male, who was really struggling to find some quality literature at his reading level to get him motivated, and to know that I had that resource, but there were 2 books on his level, and I would love it if when we're finished those 2 books, I have more right at my fingertips where I can just go and grab them. And when I sit down with my small reading groups, and even when I sit down with my large reading group, what we're seeing happen in our 3rd grade at Fort Washington Elementary School is that the kids come back even from the RTI setting where they're sitting down for 30 minutes at their reading level, and they are so excited to say, Mrs. Nitschke, when I was in Mr. Bush's class, we just did the text-dependent analysis that applies to what you're now talking about in ReadyGen, where we're reading The Year of Miss Agnes, which is a novel we're currently in the middle of that they're so excited to read every day. And they're bringing the vocabulary from Mr. Bush's room and the analysis skills from Mr. Bush's room and all of the other teachers that are working with the 3rd graders. And it's meaningful to them, and they understand. When I sit down with a group of 4 or 5 children and deliver reading instruction, I was saying to Kim, I honestly think that it's one of my very favorite parts of the day, because we always see growth in students, but to have the opportunity to know just what it is that they need and to be able to provide that, and to have them now see themselves as such capable readers and be excited when they are reading books and want to tell me about it, that's why I got into this profession. So thank you for having us here tonight, and thank you, Kim, for your continued leadership. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Nitschke. So at this point, that concludes our presentation, and we are happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you all very much. Comments or questions from the committee?
Thank you all for your presentations and your insights. One of the things I'm hearing is that it sounds like hard copies of books is what you're looking for. To what extent would e-books be a help in this?
So it's interesting. At the early levels of teaching children to read, one of the reasons that it was important that we got the ReadyGen program instead of just having basal readers, as Mrs. Smythe mentioned, is we actually need to get students to be physically touching books. One of the things that we have in our kindergarten screener now is we hand a child a book. Where's the cover? How do you turn the pages? All of those types of things. So at the very earliest grades, that's extremely helpful. The other challenge with ebooks is at those early grades, we're relying a lot on the pictures along with the text, and making sure that when those books are written, you might remember from that end that I showed you that there's a lot of intentionality about where the picture is placed relative to the text so the students can use those clues. So at the guided reading table, we would be unlikely to use ebooks. However, when students are off reading independently, so if you think about the structure of a classroom, if I as the teacher have 5 or 6 students at my table, I may have 15 students out and about in the room. And there is a place where ebooks can be very, very powerful. And there's some really interesting research about students who are reading at lower levels choosing a just right book, a book that is at their level, when they could do it on an e-reader because their peers can't see what they have chosen, versus choosing something that's inappropriate for them. So there is a place for it. I think it's outside of the guided reading table, but absolutely will be something that we look at moving forward.
And my other question is about the library and the librarians. To what extent are they included in this whole process, and can they contribute? I'm looking for ways of combining resources to make this, what sounds like a really promising approach, really work.
Thank you. So our librarians are really critical in terms of, again, students learning to select books, to read books. You know, as Claire talked about nurturing that, and Connie talked about nurturing that love of reading in the classroom. We want kids to turn around and go to the libraries and check out books and take them home and read them. The best way to grow a student as a reader is to have them read books, and read lots of books. We are very lucky, for instance, at Jarretttown Elementary, where we have Tree Milrod, who was a classroom teacher who's passionate about guided reading, leading that library. She really understands and is invested in that turnaround of books to kids. In order to conduct guided reading, you have to have multiple copies of the same text so that children can be doing that. So when we talk about establishing a teaching lending library, we're talking about paperback books, not the expense of hard library quality books, because we have to have 5 or 6 copies of the same text to do that at the table. So I think our libraries are fundamental to that. I would like to share, too, a lot of times I've heard the board talk about metrics other than PSSA scores, Keystone scores, that we can use to determine how successful our programs are. And at the time when I was an elementary principal, our librarian was really fundamental to developing a love of reading in our children, and really circling back and complementing the work that was done in the classrooms. And so one of the metrics we used was library circulation. How many more books were our students checking out year over year as we developed our reading programs? I'd like to see us do the same thing at Upper Dublin. I feel that metric of our children now loving reading and successful at reading, that they're getting more and more books out of our libraries, would be a fantastic way to have that kind of symbiotic support between the building library and the classroom.
Now I'm definitely on. So our elementary librarians have been working on looking at what it takes to develop a 21st century library program. And so as part of that work, which began when we started our digital initiative, and now is really reinforced and ramped up with the introduction of ReadyGen, and the buildings, our elementary buildings, working as a whole community around reading. They've redone their mission as a library. So I'll just read the first sentence, or a couple. The core purpose of a library media center is to build learner capacity for information literacy across media types. This includes nurturing a love of reading and the ability to discover and select appropriate resources, to research and evaluate information, and to create and communicate across a range of media types. So, to dovetail on what Dr. Miner was saying, it is building this capacity for the learner to have agency, right, to be able to select that book. Along with that, right, comes this digital complement that Dr. Miner touched on, and Tree at Jarretttown is really spearheading, and she's invested in books where there's an audio component where you can listen along. It's the same book. It looks like the book my peers have. I sign out from the library Harry Potter. And all my friends see me sign that out. It's invisible that there's an audio component, and I'm going to listen at home. In addition, our public library will come and do lessons with our librarians at the elementary all the way through the high school level And if you haven't gone to the public library to learn how to use Hoopla yet, you absolutely have to. It's a free account with your library card, and you have this access to all of these audiobooks, ebooks, graphic novels, and it will be a regular exercise for my daughter. She will sit down, right, and she pushes her reading by going and selecting these resources right there, and maybe after a few pages or a few chapters, she decides, well, that's not for me, right, and that's okay, and that becomes one of the pieces that ebook gives the learner more and more agency over.
If I can add one more thing, I was thinking recently, Betty Eisenberg, one of the reading specialists at Thomas Fitzwater, had students working in an LLI group, and they use a lot of series books in there, and she was talking about how wonderful it is to then have children be able to check out other books in that series that they've worked with in a small group through our library. So it's yet another extension of how the libraries support this work.
Oops. One more question, if I may. You mentioned that you have more teachers interested than you have opportunity to have them trained. Is there any way that you can pair up a trained teacher with a less trained teacher so that they, as a pair, as buddies, or somehow can transfer their skills? I think when you teach somebody else, you get better as well, and hopefully that's a way to sort of grow the program much more quickly.
I feel like you were listening in on the reading specialist meeting this week. We were talking, you weren't, okay. We were talking about exactly that. What are the advantages of train the trainer models versus having training directly from a trainer? In the case of the benchmark assessments, it's very specific in terms of how you score. And so we were really wrestling with that. One of the things that the reading specialists discussed, and I am very excited about, and I hope that we pursue once more teachers are on board, is the idea of inter-rater reliability. And there is a certain amount of subjectivity when a student reads a passage and then they answer a content question as to whether or not you give them a 3 or you give them a 2. And so I know that Claire and Karen Walken in her building have already started to do this, where they both sit and score a child's reading and see, do they come up with the same leveling for that child? So yes, I think you're absolutely right. Having teachers pair up, observe each other in the work, teach each other in the work, and make sure that we have that leveling is going to be really important. In terms of sheer volume, I think that's an ongoing conversation. How many people are we able to train now, and how feasible is turnaround training versus having another training session? But as far as ongoing work and continuing to sharpen our skills, you're absolutely right. There's no better way to do that than through a peer.
I know we've talked in other meetings, especially the finance meeting, about purchasing the guided reading books, but I can't, and I seem to remember it was spread over 2 years, but I can't remember whether it was last year and this year, or this year and next year.
Yeah. So it's being proposed in this year's budget for K-3, and then for 4 and 5 in the following year's budget.
So this year's budget would be to purchase during 18-19.
Correct. Correct. In July. Yes.
Okay. Could you also just spend a minute or two, I don't know, talking about what's going on in the rest of the classroom as a teacher is working with one group during the guided reading? I don't know if you'd rather have someone else.
Do either of you two ladies want to take it, or I'm happy to? Okay.
Have you heard of the term Daily 5? Kind of gets mentioned often. I think a lot of teachers will discuss that. So a lot of it in the beginning of the school year is organizing that flow of your class, and it's that first month of just getting your classroom management in place, getting those kind of like stations in place. So some things they'll be doing writing, they'll be doing things like read with partner, they'll be doing word work, which the teacher prepares for them. I've been in classrooms observing a group of 4 students with a teacher, and you can hear a pin drop. And there's rules in place. You can't come to interrupt the teacher unless there's an emergency, because they need to be focusing on what they're doing at their area while the teacher has that 20-minute block with that guided reading group. So it takes that first month to really get it established, and they do a great job of that. It doesn't happen instantaneously. It takes time. But whenever you hear that Daily 5 term, that's what they're talking about.
in the Daily Five or whatever the students are doing, they're doing very, very specific tasks that involve reading and responding. It's not a spot where students have worksheets and fill out worksheets and they're passively working, but they're interacting with each other, because we know that reading and writing is interactive, and the best way you become a better reader, as we do in book clubs, we read something and we discuss it, or we pair reading. So it's very intentional what's going on in those small groups. So I just thought I'd let you know that they're not left to their own devices during that time.
Thank you, Kathy. I think what I want to say about that specifically is we really focus on authentic tasks, authentic reading, authentic writing, and not that worksheet piece which she mentioned.
Anyone else?
Sure, just a quick one. First off, I appreciate the story about Mr. Bush. I love it when our teachers, I think, model that they are lifelong learners as well as the students. In addition to that, I guess we've also asked questions about facilities, and facilities has been a pretty big discussion in terms of how that matches education. I guess the first question in regards to that is, are all of our classrooms equipped with the guided reading table so that our facilities are enhancing that? The other part of that is, I think with these libraries, we've talked about storage of books in terms of where that's going to be spaced. Is that also, I guess, a discussion for the facilities committee to consider?
So those are excellent questions, Dr. Kim, and very relevant ones. And just like I mentioned that our teachers are in very different places in terms of their ability to deliver on guided reading right now, so are their classrooms. So that teachers who have been a part of this work or been interested in this work even before ReadyGen, many of them have what we call a kidney-shaped table, or now they even have kind of a nicer one that's a U-shaped table where the teacher can kind of slide right into the middle. But not all of our teachers do. One of the first times that our trainer came, he was working at a big, circular table and trying to lean across the table, because you really need to be listening in to students as they whisper read. So I would say that varies significantly building by building. Principals have tackled that in different ways, trying to order specific pieces of furniture. But as we move towards 2020, having that particular piece of furniture, that table and those chairs, will be very, very important. They're not hugely expensive, and like I said, we have many of them, but it is something that we will have to consider over the course of time. The other thing is, you're exactly right about the book storage. The proposal that we are making around guided reading, because there's 6 copies of every title, 200 titles per grade level times 4 grade levels. I'm not a math person, but it's lots of books. It is a lot of books, and we're going to need bookshelves for that. And I have been talking with Ms. Bray and with the principals about repurposing existing bookshelves and what we can do about that space. But that is certainly something that we're cognizant of, that they don't have to be fancy bookshelves. They don't have to be, it really is just a space to store them. I think the most important thing isn't, whether they're beautiful wood bookshelves or existing metal ones that we have, but that we organize them well and efficiently so that teachers like Mrs. Zanichka can go in right there and pull it and find it and meet a student's need in real time without having to dig through closets and those sorts of things. So however we do it, we're going to focus on organization and ease of teacher use. But you're absolutely right, those things will have to be considered.
We're spreading out the purchases of the materials over 2 years. Do you remember what the costs were for each year?
First of all, they're not being spread out from a cost perspective. I just want to be clear about that. The reason that we are waiting on 4.5 is because those books actually haven't been released by Fontes and Pinnell until next year. If they were released now, I would actually be asking for them now.
Okay.
I might ask in a different way to spread the cost over 2 years, which is to buy partial sets of all the K-5, but the reason that we're splitting is because they're simply not available. I would love to have them available for 4.5 next year.
Okay.
They're not. In terms of the cost, I don't want to misquote you. I could certainly send that to you. I did present it in the finance, but I don't have it with me this evening.
And I think it was at the Curriculum Summit.
It was at the Curriculum
too.
Summit. It was
Yep.
in my original budget
Yep.
presentation in the finance report.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much. And again, thank you so much to the teachers who are doing it every day and the principals who are leading it. I just have to give them a round of applause. They're amazing. Thank you.
Okay, now we're ready to go through some of the so So the first one we really want to talk about is the Sandy Run Middle School schedule update. Mrs. Morrison, I believe you would be handling that.
Hello and good evening, everyone. We are reconvening our Sandy Run Scheduling Committee. We had a committee with representatives from the faculty, the administration, central office, the school board, and parents that ran for approximately a year. With that came several updates to the school board through the education committee. At our last update with recommendations on the Sandy Run schedule, which was implemented this fall, it was determined that we would continue to garner input as we have with the implementation of the new schedule. Informally, we garnered input from faculty, staff, from staff, students, and parents the first part of the year, making minor adjustments. Last week, we sent out surveys to teachers, to students, and to parents so that we could get further input. The first reason for reconvening that committee is to take a look at the results of that survey and to make some recommendations where we can make updates to the schedule to better serve the needs of the students. Additionally, one of the foundational visions of the committee was to provide students with the opportunity to learn through inquiry-based, problem-based learning. We put together a team working with Mr. Vinogradoff and the Sandy Run administration and what is now a team of close to 25 teachers. We took a very close look at both problem-based and personalized learning. We studied some texts. We visited 5 different schools. And we are now ready to make a presentation to the committee to consider having what we call an I-team. An I-team would be a team of students in 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade that would be particularly dedicated to inquiry-based, personalized, and problem-based learning. More specifically, we'll bring a presentation update in March, either to the Education Committee or to the full Legislative Committee.
So, are you going to present about the schedule toward the end of the year after you've reconvened?
I think with there will probably be an update in March regarding the outcome of our scheduling survey and our meeting with the scheduling committee. And that may take a little bit longer, you're right, in observing that. But we are very excited about moving forward with the I-team concept at each grade level. And there will be a presentation to the committee to garner feedback from them, and then again to the board.
I look forward to hearing about that one.
Thank you.
Just was curious, in your visits to 5, what did the spaces look like? Are they being delivered in traditional classes, or was it?
It was really a mixture. There we visited Lower Marion, which has a problem-based learning team at each grade level at their middle school. We had intended to visit Radnor, but there was an unfortunate circumstance at Radnor that prevented us from coming. We visited Cheltenham. So Lower Marion did not have a specific space. Radnor has a traditional building where they adapted some space. I haven't personally visited it. We visited Cheltenham High School, and they do have a very specific space for the learning. We went to Science Leadership Academy and the Workshop School in Philadelphia. Both of those spaces weren't particularly adapted to 21st century learning. What I believe that our group of teachers and administrators took away is that doing inquiry-based, problem-based learning in a personalized way can take place in any kind of space, but it was also evident to us that if you have a really great space, it can enhance the learning of students.
I think one of the takeaways was definitely what was palpable was the presence of space frustration or not. There was clearly a need for the ability to have small group instruction within a space, right? And so if that classroom was too small, it was an acoustic cacophony. And just a slightly larger space, same number of students, and you could have a conversation in that small group without the neighboring conversation interfering. And there was also the need in those spaces to bring together more than just a traditional class, right? To have several teachers in a room with several classes in a room for something large and sustained that would be happening. And so when you had that space flexibility, that was powerful. And without that, you got very creative. And again, at the end of the day, the main takeaway was that it was really about practice and about the culture of learning, both for students, teachers, and parents.
I mean, maybe I should save these questions for when you do the presentation, but I'll ask one anyway now. Is this going to be by student choice?
We will determine through the work of the Sandy Run administration, along with Mr. Vinogradov and with me, the protocol around how students make application to the I-teams. Fortunately, other districts like Lower Merion and Radnor and Cheltenham have gone before us in the two schools I mentioned in Philadelphia. So we will be leaning on them to make determinations. I think something that we already feel fairly strongly about is that we would have what's called an equity model for application, that the I-team students represent Upper Dublin student body as well as possible given the applicant pool. So, for example, we wouldn't want a team that has an extraordinarily large number of students that hold a gifted IEP. Now, we will say, and we'll say this when we move forward, we don't know what kind of applicants we'll get. And that's something that will be new, and we'll need to make determinations as we move forward. It is our first year of doing this, and so I think the teachers and the administrators involved in this recognize that there's going to be a learning curve, and that we're going to be making really, really good decisions based on not only our own experience, but the experiences of our peers, but that we are going to be learning along the way.
Does anyone else have comments or questions?
I'm not sure I totally get it, but are you proposing to have an I model or I course for this upcoming school year?
That's right, for the 2018-19 school year, with a team for 6th grade, a team for 7th grade, and a team for 8th grade.
Right, thanks.
Thank you. On to the next topic, the changes. I mean, we're revisiting the school calendar because there's a few changes.
Yeah, there are two changes to the half-day program. The high school at the time when we brought forward the full-day closure schedule as well as the half-days, the high school had two dates that were yet not determined, one of them for PSAT testing and one of them having to do with the Spirit Week. So there are two changes to the calendar, and those have been highlighted, and they'll be updated on our school calendar as well once the school board approves this motion.
They're highlighted in yellow on, not on the main calendar, but on the early dismissal days. Does anybody have any questions or comments about this? If not, we will move this forward for the agenda next week. All right, moving on. The Young Writers, Young Readers program.
Along with our Summer Scholars offerings, which this year will include robotics for students in K2 and 3-5. Concurrently, we offer through the Young Readers and Writers program, an opportunity for students to practice writing. And we have a teacher, in-district teacher, who facilitates this, and it's been a very successful program. We've been running it for as long as I can remember, and we really enjoy the relationship we have on behalf of our students.
Any comments or questions on this?
So this is, we've run this many, many years. We moved it into the high school.
That's correct.
Since,
it runs concurrently with Summer Scholars.
Yeah, good. Okay.
I just see in the letter it said that they had 38 students last year. Do you know on average or the rough estimate in terms of how many? It says they can accommodate up to 75, but I guess how many have typically enrolled?
I don't have that information right now.
Anything else? If not, we'll move that on for next week also. Now we're on to student activities. There are a number of items under here. Rather than go through them all, I'll just ask if people have any questions about any of them. No questions. I just have one question. On the trips to Grounds for Sculpture, in one case there are 40 students and 3 chaperones, and in one case, the other day, there's 45 students and 1 chaperone.
In the case of both cases, the number of teachers are similar, but there are parent chaperones going along.
Okay. If no other questions, we will move this along.
Just curious. I know the Hamilton Sculpture Museum. What do we do it every year? Or is this a special trip? And so how are we tying it into the curriculum?
So there are 2 different trips. One is through the art department. I think it's a little more obvious, the curricular connection through art to the Grounds of Sculpture. The AP French and Spanish classes go to the Grounds of Sculpture. There are many representations by painters that are represented as sculptures, and so there is an entire learning protocol that goes along with that for those students, in part in preparation for the AP exam. Wait, I'm going to correct it. It's AP Latin and AP French that go together to attend.
Anything else? And we will move that along also. The last item is conferences. As with student activities, we'll just ask if anyone has any questions about any of these.
I see on the conference list at the end we have Mr. Height from the National Quiz Bowl competition at the end of May, beginning of June. And I certainly appreciate Mr. Height's confidence that the team will qualify to go to the National Quiz Bowl competition at the end of May, because we're not there yet. But I don't see the equivalent students going to the National Quiz Bowl competition in the student activities. Shouldn't those go together?
I believe that we already approved that student travel during Education and Legislative Committee last month, and paperwork is submitted separately from the teacher. And again, obviously, and of course they're going to win and go to the competition, but if they should not for any reason, then none of those funds will be dispersed.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Just because I'm a little interested, could you explain what the Mindful Leader workshop is? Either one of you.
The IU leadership has presented this as an offering to all district administrators, suggesting that we all may need to do a better job of centering ourselves in our work and finding some better ways to resolve conflict and disagreements, those sort of things. So when I was at the last IU meeting, they suggested that all district leadership would be interested in attending, and I can provide you with the flyer, but it sounded like a very good resource.
Is this about relationships among teachers and administrators, or?
Right, it's about as a leader just having relationships with community members, with board members, everybody that you may encounter, and how you can just do a better job of managing the stress associated with that.
Can we go? No, I'm just.
Yes, I'm sure they'll offer a board version.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ropsky.
Yes, Eva answered several of my questions prior to the meeting, but I do have one with the State Music Educators Conference. Is that a competition, or is this just new techniques on marching or types of music available?
It is both, and we did you passed a motion last month sending students to the PMEA conference, and they do need a chaperone, and Mr. Horn will go along with the students as a chaperone, which is a requirement, but at the same time, he will also be taking professional development courses in the area of music.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If there are no other comments or questions, we'll move this along also. And that concludes our reports for tonight. It's now time for community input. If anyone would like to speak, come to the microphone. No? So, seeing no one wishing to speak, the meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting will be March 5th, Monday evening, 6 p.m., as usual, in this room, the Cardinal Room.
Just an announcement that the board will move to an executive session, conclusion of this meeting.